Hello everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and we're now going to talk about boxing now and do a quick preview of the upcoming welterweight clash between Terence Crawford and Kell Brook, which is due to take place on the MGM ground in Las Vegas on Saturday, November the 14th. This fight will be for Crawford's WBO welterweight title, and as he looks to bolster his resume with further big name opponents. This will be Kell Brook's return to welterweight since his struggling performances against Mark DeLuca and Michael Civara. Both have similar records on the surface. Crawford has 36 fights and 36 wins. Brook has 41 fights with 39 wins. Both have 21 knockouts. There's only a year difference in their age. Crawford is 33, Brook is 34 now. So both are well-rounded and experienced competitors within the welterweight division. Now I think overall this will be a closer fight than what many people are anticipating. Crawford is the favourite. As we all know, he has this pound for pound status following on from unifying the 140 division. Many feel that he is without doubt within the top 2 or top 3 best fighters around there, and from what I'm hearing from a lot of critics and pundits, everybody's expecting a resolute and conclusive win for Crawford, but I think we're underestimating how good Kell Brook is. Kell Brook is a very strong and durable fighter, and he only has 2 losses on his record, one of which was at middleweight, of course, against Golovkin, who was the dominant fighter at the time, and the other was against Errol Spence Jr., which I think was a very close fight. And I've stated in previous videos that I actually had Brook a couple of rounds up before he essentially quit. He knelt down and he quit in the later rounds. So it's not as if Brook has taken heavy losses throughout his whole career. He actually was a prime welterweight following his victory over Sean Porter to win the IBF title. And I've commented on a previous video, which you can check out on the channel, how I believe Kell Brook's career has been mismanaged, and he really should have been fighting the top welterweights when he was at the prime of his career, and they tried to generate him as a pay-per-view star, and he was fighting really weak opponents such as Frankie Gavin and Jojo Dan and Kevin Bizier, and I think there has been a failed effort really to propel his status as the world's top welterweight. But we all know he's had absences throughout the ring and he's struggled to maintain the weight. He's really been bouncing back and forth between welterweight and middleweight. A lot of people have felt that he was a very big size for the welterweight division and have commented that maybe 154 was the better division for him. He's had a couple of fights there, but I think they've slowly realised that the 154 division really isn't the money division. It really is the welterweights. That's where the bigger fights and the bigger opponents were. So we've seen Brook steadily come back down to this division. Again, there's a lot of doubt about his discipline and his attitude, training in between fights. You can go on various articles and videos how he struggled really to maintain weight, and people have questioned his overall attitude and dedication in this later stage of his career. But in my opinion, if Kell Brook turns up and he's at prime Kell Brook, the Brook against Porter, then this is going to be a much closer fight than what people are expecting. Now, okay, Brook may not have the quick hand speed of Amir Khan, for example, but Brook is a much more stronger, resolute and grounded opponent. I can't see Crawford scoring an early knockout for Brook. If you think about it, Golovkin couldn't knock out Brook, right? It was his corner that threw in the towel. Okay, Brook was getting a bit overwhelmed. I think it was the 6th round, fair enough, but he was still standing, he was still trading punches, he was still competitive. And against Errol Spence, as I mentioned, he was winning the fight, and it was more a case of perhaps maybe flashbacks from the Golovkin fight where he suffered a broken orbital socket in that fight, and he had similar damage to another eye against the Spence fight, and maybe that's what really caused some sort of flashbacks and psychosis against him and caused him to quit the fight, right? But apart from that, you know, Brook hasn't gone through and suffered heavy losses, right? So if he can turn up in prime condition physically and also mentally, and that's really the key factor here, the mental condition of Kell Brook. What will his attitude and discipline be going on to this fight? Many have commented that this is a potential cash out for him. He is 34 years old now. He's not really amongst the big names when we talk about the welterweight division now. We all know that the big fight that everybody wants to see is Crawford against Errol Spence now, and Kell Brook really hasn't been talked about in terms of the welterweight division a lot. So could this be a cash out? Could this be win, lose or draw? He will retire after this fight. We all know that they struggled to find a UK broadcaster for this fight, which I think is telling in itself. I think this is a good competitive fight, but it's not really the fight that people were really hyped up for, right? Because if it was, then UK broadcasters would have picked up the fight, right? But what you have to remember is that it's on at 5 in the morning, and again, it wasn't really a fight that everybody was talking about. Crawford himself is not really a massive global superstar. He's big within the boxing bubble, if you like, and if you are a hardcore fan, you of course know about him, but he's not really known on a massive global scale. So a lot of the Crawford's fight, there isn't really a big hype about them outside of the boxing bubble. So again, when you look at it from that perspective, you can kind of understand why the UK broadcasters didn't pick it up. Again, where you have, it's difficult to sell, especially when we're in this pandemic state of boxing where we don't have crowds at fights to really hype it up and give a much more of an atmosphere. Even if you're watching it on the television, right, it's always better to have crowds there. When you have the atmosphere, it builds up the intensity and adds more the viewing experience of the fight. So when we look at it from Crawford's perspective, now, as I mentioned, he is deemed one of the best pound for pound fighters in the fight. He unified the 140 division, but I think the problem with Crawford that he at welterweight 147, he just doesn't have the big names. Now yes, he beat Amir Khan, it was within the 6th round, but it was due to a low blow, and it was a low blow. Yes, he did knock Khan down in the 1st round, I believe, but it was really more of a flash knockdown. It wasn't really a brutal destruction of Khan. Khan was losing the fight, he was getting overwhelmed, but it was a low blow. And against Kalisikas later on, he did eventually stop him in the 9th round, but he did get knocked down in the 3rd round. They deemed it a slip, but it was a knockdown. And I think Crawford's problem is that he's, again, like Usyk, he is a scientific fighter. He doesn't go in there and smash opponents in 2 or 3 rounds. That's not his style, that's not his mindset. You know, when you have a technically sound scientific fighter like Crawford, this is a fighter who's going to take his time, set his position, really consider where his punches are going, really look to be more accurate and clean with his boxing work and use combinations. We can see from his fighting style where he likes that right hook and punches to the body and really looks to set his position and move his opponent around, right? So he's not a knockout artist. From a hype perspective, it's very difficult for the scientific fighter to generate much hype and buzz. And when you look at his resume at the welterweight, he just doesn't have the big names. And maybe this is the ultimate problem of one of the big stumbling blocks in trying to get a fight against Errol Spence, is that when you don't have the resume, you don't have the names, it's difficult to kind of build your case as to why you should get equal split or equal share of the earnings against Errol Spence in a mega unification fight that would be for the division. That is the top fight within the division. That is the fight that really determines who is the best within the division. But as we all know, there's multiple issues as to why that fight won't happen. So I think, again, by selecting Kell Brook, this is Crawford again looking to bolster his resume with big name opponents. Now, if Crawford does win, does it really boost his status? I'm not too sure, because at the end of the day, people will still regard maybe Spence as the top guy in the division because he has the WBC belt and he beat Sean Porter in a very good competitive fight. I had that fight as a draw, and he also has the IBF belt, of course, when he beat Kell Brook. So beating Kell Brook for Crawford, I'm not sure it does anything more for his status. It doesn't take his status down as such, but I think it just leaves him in the same position. You know, people really need to see that Spence fight to determine who is the best within the division. So I think it's a good competitive fight. I think it's going to be a lot closer than what people are anticipating, especially if Kell Brook can turn up in his prime condition. If Kell Brook can turn up big, strong, difficult to break down, and he has a good sound technique as well. He's not a brawler by any means necessary. He has good punching power. He definitely has more punching power than Amir Khan, that's for sure, if not necessarily the hand speed. So it's going to be difficult for Crawford to break him down, and I think if Kell Brook can turn up big, strong, determined, disciplined, then it's going to be a struggle for Crawford. Now, if I had to make a verdict, I would probably go for a very late Terence Crawford stoppage, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if Kell Brook pulled off the win. Right, it's going to be difficult for Kell Brook getting the points decision in America if it is indeed a close fight. So he's really going to have to be on this game. He's going to have to be positive, step on the front foot, really let Crawford know early on that this is going to be a difficult fight for him. His defense is going to have to be good and sharp, which I think it generally is. We never really see Kell Brook in a fight when he's constantly getting tagged or he's taking much brutal punishment. I mean, if you're going way back, you can look at the Carson fights. Both of them are really good, epic fights to watch. But really, in general, Brook has been a very strong and resolute fighter. So I think this is quite a competitive match. It's a good competitive match. Again, maybe not the fight that boxing hardcore fans were looking for, and not the fight that maybe casual fans were really interested in. But in the realms of boxing, this is a good competitive fight between very good, strong, top welterweights, very experienced within the division now, and I think, yeah, we could get a very good competitive fight. It may not be an epic all-out war, because I think both fighters are too scientific and they're too grounded for that, but I think we are going to get a very good competitive fight overall. And again, if push comes to shove, I'm looking for maybe a Crawford stoppage in the later rounds, maybe in the 11th round late on. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if Kell Brook pulls off a points decision. I can't really see Kell Brook knocking out Crawford. I can't really see Crawford knocking out Kell Brook. I think it may be a case of if Crawford manages to overwhelm Brook later on, and again, Kell Brook maybe gets those flashbacks against what happened against Spence and Golovkin, that may again be the deciding factor. I wouldn't be overly shocked if we get another quit from Brook. If he kneels down, he finds the pressure and intensity too much, he just decides enough is enough and he pulls out of the fight. It wouldn't shock me if that happened either. But don't be surprised at Kell Brook. Don't underestimate him. He is still a very strong, powerful welterweight, and he's still got a lot to offer even at this later stage of his career. So my verdict is a late Crawford stoppage, but don't be overly shocked if Brook comes out with a close points victory. So those are my thoughts on the fight between Crawford and Brook taking place on Saturday, November 14th. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What do you think about Crawford's performance at welterweight division so far? Do you think this is a good selection of opponent for him? Do you think this will bolster his resume and get fans more convinced that he is the top name of the division? Or do you not think that will happen until he faces Spence in what is easily the biggest fight in the welterweight division? And what do you think will happen if Kell Brook does pull off the victory? Do you think he will finally try and make that fight with Amir Khan, which I think the ship is sailed on? I think there's no interest in that fight. We know how long and desperate he's been getting that Kell Brook fight with Amir Khan, that big UK pay-per-view, even though I don't think it's a UK pay-per-view anymore. Will he have one more attempt to try and get that Amir Khan, or will he maybe retire from the sport if he does get the victory and he can retire on a high and get a big payday in the process? But let me know what you think in the comments below about this fight. I will of course be doing a full-on fight review of this fight. That will probably be Sunday now, because we all know in the UK time this fight will take place at 5 in the morning, so I will try and do my review on Sunday as early as possible. But those are my thoughts for now on the preview of the fight between Terence Crawford and Kell Brook. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.